it's the same thing as being an entrepreneur. You really need to test the waters before you take the plunge. So what I did was, when I saw what I thought was an incredible product, an incredible opportunity with regard to Brooks Financial Systems, I said to Bob Brooks, I said, when you leave, this was a Friday, when you leave, where are you going? He said, I'm going back to Virginia to the home office. I said, well, do me a favor, if it's okay with you, can you leave the machine with me over the, for the next week or so? No problem, no problem. He left the machine. Within 2 weeks, I had sold 17 machines to 5 lenders that I knew in the Miami area. 17 machines. My arrangement with Bob Brooks was that he would get the same amount of money as if he had sold the machines himself. And he said to me, how can you do that? And I said, well, you're charging $22,195 per machine, right? And he said, yes. And I said, I'm going to charge $2,995. And the difference between the two, the $800, that'll be my commission. What do you think of that idea, Bob? What do you think he said? First of all, he thought he had died and gone to heaven. He said, this guy's going to sell these machines. I don't have to get on an airplane and travel, and my firm is going to make the same amount of money. Is that not a deal he couldn't refuse? Yeah. And that's what happened. That's how it evolved. And it grew from there. But that's what I call the testing the waters, number 3. How about number 4? Make sure that you always have the best professional advice. I think we covered that with regard to White & Case, with regard to your accountants. And oh, by the way, those of you, I assume most of you are in the School of Business here, right? Take the accounting courses. Take them sooner rather than later. Don't avoid them. I'm only sticking my neck out so far. At least take the first 1 or 2. I know, hold your nose. It's not going to be the most fun you've ever had, I don't think. And I'm not being disparaging intentionally toward accounting, but I didn't do that, and I wish I had. It's a lot harder to teach yourself later than it is to bite the bullet and go for it now. Number 5. One of my clients called me up and invited me to come to Michigan in 1996. And I went to Michigan with Pete Lefebvre, my chief technology officer at the time. We arrive in Michigan, we get into the rental car, we go to the client's site, and we're in this conference room. And in this conference room, there, all along the wall, all you can see is big game. Not too politically correct today, but remember this was 20-some years ago, or whatever, 15 years ago. You saw big game, the heads of the big game, and all of this all around the room. And so the big guy that ran the company was 6'7", he weighed almost 350 pounds. His son was 6'6", and he weighed about the same. They both come in, sit down at the conference room table across from Pete and I, and they say, we want your new technology, and we don't want to pay for it. Okay, that's pretty clear, isn't it? So they want something that might be worth $1 million, and they don't want to pay for it. Well, what ended up happening is they said, you don't have to tell us now, right this minute, what your reaction to that is. We will leave you and Pete discuss it, and we'll be back in about a half hour. So they get up and they leave the room. Pete looks at me, I look at Pete. Pete says, I don't know what you're thinking, Doug, but I'm thinking I don't want to be on the wall with the rest of these beasts in here. I think we ought to give them what they're asking for. And I said, Pete, I like your logic. I agree with you. That's what we ought to do. So did we have a gun to our head? I think so. But did we possibly do the right thing? Well, when you hear the rest of the story, I think you'll understand why maybe we did. When they came back in the room, we said, we think that you have a great idea, that we ought to give you the new stuff. And they said, great, then we'll continue to work with your development team to develop all of the new stuff you're doing into the best it can possibly be. The only problem was they didn't mean it. I don't think they meant it. Maybe they did at the time, but as the next year developed and unfolded, they didn't deliver on their side of it. They went and licensed another software company to replace us. And then they asked us if we would accept, instead of our annual renewal fee, if we would accept only 6-month renewal fee instead. And we did. 3.5 years later, they were still paying the 6-month renewal fee every 6 months. and they still hadn't gone live on the new system. And the big boss called me, invited me to Michigan. I went there, had lunch with him in the same restaurant where Jimmy Hoffa was last seen before he was no longer seen again. And I had a salad. I was trying to watch what I ate and not gain too much weight. And the other gentleman that owned the company had the fried calamari. And he said to me, and I quote, "It was my mistake 3.5 years ago. We want your latest technology now. We know that you're going to charge us for it, and we understand that." What they could have had for $50,000. Give me a guess how much they paid. Anybody? Pardon me? $250? How much? In total. The license was $2.5 million, and the professional services fees over the next 2 years were $7.5 million. A total of $10 million. That wasn't because we were punitive or we were trying to be disrespectful. That's what our stuff at that time was worth. The head of the technology department walked into the board of directors, that's why number 5 is there, and said, I said, "How are you going to explain to the board why you're making this decision to spend this amount of money?" And he said, "It's never too late to make the right decision." Number 6, I told you about that earlier, and I think it's as true today as it was when we were attempting to build that culture. It's based on self-actualization of the individual, their realization that in being a part of this organization, they can do so much more, and for the company, it's the same thing. Number 7, encourage your colleagues to remember, and that says FOR, and I apologize, it's supposed to say FDR, which stands for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said there is no agony like that of indecision. Isn't that a great quote? Number 8, always remember the Jesuit expression, it is oftentimes easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. You've never done that with your parents before, I don't think. Number 9, remember the Irish expression. My dad had this on a plaque in the kitchen. When you say to somebody, "I'm not going to decide that right now," guess what? You just made a decision. You may not realize it, doesn't feel like it, but you did. How about number 10? Leaders must remember to simply lead, follow, or just get out of the way. True, huh? And number 11, don't tolerate unprofessional or inappropriate behavior. And this is one that's a little tough for me, and I've certainly never done it in a forum like this, but I'll do it today, because if you can learn from my experience, I'd like you to. In 1992, I got a call from a client who told me that there had been an instance of sexual harassment. And I said, you know, we have a requirement, procedure within the company of how to deal with that. Please let me know who the employee was. And he said, "That's the problem." He said, "I'm very uncomfortable in even having made this call, let alone in telling you who it was." It was my own brother. I struggled over the next number of days before reaching the final conclusion and calling my attorney. And I told him that I had come to the conclusion that if it were any other employee other than my brother, I would have fired them. And I told him that that's the decision that I made. I don't have to tell you whether I was invited by my mother to Thanksgiving dinner that year, or whether my wife and children were that well received as a result of what I did. But when I looked at the context of having to protect the lives of the other professionals, 100 or more people within the firm and their families, I decided I had one conclusion and one decision to make. It was he that prompted the decision to be made because of his conduct. On creativity, it's got to be encouraged in an enduring state of the art technology enterprise. And 13, you've got to make certain that you recruit and retain the best professional talent. One thing that always helped me for all the years that we continued to recruit folks was